Welcome to Ancient Faith Today Live. This is Father Tom Soroka. I'm so glad that you're with us today. I'm looking forward to our topic today. It's something that I've been interested in for a very long time. I've talked about it in various parishes, and I hope it's something that you'll enjoy talking about too. Some of you have already reached out, so I want you to join us right now at youtube.com/Ancient Faith Ministries or facebook.com/Ancient Faith Ministries. Join us in the live chat. We need to hear your comments about this. This particular topic is about Islam and its growth in the West. And the growth in the West is enough to be quite noticeable. We're going to be talking about some things that are happening in various cities. And I don't want to be labeled an alarmist. I'll talk about that in a second, but this is something that I think is uniquely important to us as Orthodox Christians. Remember also that you can text us right from your phone to 412-206-5012, 412-206-5012. I would love to hear from you. All right, so let's get started. So we are going to talk about Islam and its growth in the West. And I think this is something that really is very important. Now, we, of course, are part of the wonderful Ancient Faith Ministries network, and we, of course, respect very much the leadership of the Antiochian Christian Archdiocese. And I think that Orthodox Christians from various places may have different feelings about this particular topic. Those who have lived, with Muslims before may have one experience. Those of us in the West may have different experiences. And I think that this is something that is both an Orthodox topic, it's a Christian topic, it's also an American topic. So I think this is very important that we discuss this, all right? So I'm going to ask, I guess it's Simon or Mike, I'm sorry, should have asked to throw up the first slide, which is Islam growing in the West. And the reason why this is an important topic, I think, is both religious and cultural. It is a religious topic from the standpoint of, although we can't say that the United States was ever officially a Christian nation, the United States, of course, is a religiously plural nation. However, we can't deny that the United States has always been predominantly Christian. And even if the expression of Christianity in the United States was predominantly Protestant, and of course, the Roman Catholics are a very large part of the United States, Orthodoxy is and has been for a long time very small. There still is something very, very different about Islam versus Christianity. And again, even though Orthodox Christians in the Middle East, in the Holy Land, in some Eastern European countries have lived alongside Muslims for a very long time, in some places for 1400 years, there still is something that we have to discuss, and we have to discuss it honestly. So let's bring up the first slide. Islam growing in the West. Now, you'll notice on this particular, I'm sorry, I was looking at a different picture. You'll notice in that first slide, okay, is a really beautiful mosque. I mean, whatever you think about Islam, about Muslims, so forth, there's real beauty here. Okay. This is a picture from Dearborn, Michigan. Okay. And Dearborn, Michigan is one of the largest populations of Muslims in the United States. Now, those areas of Michigan were always largely Christian. And it's important for us to recognize that there is a kind of different way of embracing culture between Christianity and Islam. Christianity often has assimilated to the area in which it resides. Even Orthodox Christianity, I would say, always seems to assimilate very well, even if it seems somewhat foreign to those who are not Orthodox Christians. It may seem more like Islam. And, we can say right now that much of what Islam projects to be religious architecture or religious singing, religious postures, much of that actually was taken from Orthodox Christianity. And so this is why, for those non-Orthodox that are watching this right now, it's important for you to understand that Orthodoxy has a unique relationship with the Muslim world. I'm not saying it's good, but I am saying it's unique. So I think this particular way of looking at this issue is very, very important from an Orthodox standpoint. So let's look at the second slide. And so this second slide is of it's called the Islamic Center of America. And it's in Dearborn, Michigan. And, if you took the minarets off and you put crosses on it, it would look like an Orthodox church, right? I mean, this very much is the style of architecture from the Levant, from the Middle East, that we're used to. Now, the guys have jumped to the third slide there. I wanted you to go to the second slide, but let's just stay on the third slide now. So in the third slide, what you see when you pan out from the Islamic Center of America is an Orthodox church right next door. So in that area of Dearborn, Michigan, okay, they went back. There you go. You have this St. Clement of Ohrid Orthodox Church. Somebody asked which was built first. The church was built first. Okay, the church was built first. In this area of Dearborn, as there was a very large population of Muslims emigrating to the U.S., they tended to emigrate into this area of Michigan, but of course they're all over the place. They built this Islamic Center of America right next to an Orthodox church. Now, this is actually a Bulgarian patriarchal church. And the Bulgarians, by the way, know very well about relations with Islam. Macedonia, Bulgaria, they were not unaffected by the Islamic incursion. However, whether this was purposeful by the Islamic Center of America or not, it stands as a kind of living icon of what is happening in more and more cities in the United States. That is the growing presence of Muslims and Islam. Now, I will say at the outset that as an American citizen, and those of us who are watching from foreign lands, you may not be aware that in America we have amendments to our Constitution, which is essentially additions, amendments, changes to the Constitution. And the first 10 of them are called the Bill of Rights. And the first amendment to the Constitution basically says that the government cannot make any laws against the free exercise of religion, and they can't make any laws to establish a state religion. So we are having this conversation, understanding that there are other factors here that American citizens need to recognize. And that is, America is a place that welcomes people of all religion, and that you cannot be barred from the United States because of your religion, nor can you be kept from practicing your religion. Now, there are certain fringe elements and so forth that have been, they've been challenged by the United States. There was the polygamy of the Mormons. That was challenged by the United States. The United States tried to go after Scientology, but they lost. And so Scientology is considered a religion. And of course, I'm not saying that Islam is equated to Scientology. I'm saying that in the United States, there is freedom to practice your religion. Okay? Now, we're going to look at some of the other factors why Islam is growing so quickly in the West. And by the West, I'm including both the United States, Canada. I think Canada's always had a very large presence of Muslims. And then Western Europe. Okay? A lot of Muslims there. Growing number. So let's look at slide number 4. And then I'm going to have you watch a video, very short video. So here's my kind of apologia for talking about this issue. Because I want to justify our discussing this particular issue. I know not everyone would agree that we would talk about Islam. And I know that some leaders at Ancient Faith would say, well, don't sort of like, I should never be defensive. But I do want to say, at times I've been accused of being an alarmist, right? I'm an alarmist. But the reality is, any Orthodox Christian priest worth his salt has to be able to sort of see the signs of the times. The Lord Jesus Christ tells us this. We have to see what is happening before us, and we have to soberly and accurately and in a Christian manner analyze these things. So I think it's totally reasonable, and I would say important, that we talk about this. So here is the way that we're going to sort of go through this. The first thing we're going to do after a little video is we're going to talk about the history of Islamic expansion in Orthodox lands. That's very important because this is how we're going to justify talking about this. We have been through this before as an Orthodox people. We understand this. We know what happens. And some might say, well, America is different. America is different. You could never have what happened in the Middle East in America. And I would say that never think that massive changes cannot happen in America. Things can change in a very broad way more quickly than you would think. It can happen. And it is happening. And attitudes are changing. And there are consequences to all of this. So we want to look back. We want to say, how has Orthodoxy fared when Islam, when Muslims take over an area? We're also going to look at the rapid growth of Muslims outpacing Christian growth. And by growth here, I'm talking about all the aspects of growth, whether it is living, whether it is having babies, whether it is conversions, okay? We have to look at those things to understand how this is going to go. We're also going to look at migration of Muslims into non-United States Western countries. This is very, very important. Okay? Then we're going to talk a little bit about cultural dimensions of Western life. How does it jive with Islam? And then, if we have a chance, we're going to look at how does this usually go in new lands? When the Islamic population increases, does their attitude change in terms of the way in which they want the culture, the government to change? Okay? This is very, very important. All right? So we're going to do that. But first, let's look at some of the turmoil that is happening even in an area like Dearborn, Michigan, a place like Minneapolis, which has a very large Muslim population, Hamtramck, Michigan. What is happening in those lands right now? Watch this video. It's very interesting. It's only about 2 minutes. Let me know what you think. Watch this.
Some members of Minnesota's Muslim community say they have scored a victory for religious freedom today.
As of today, Minneapolis is the first major city in the country allowing mosques to broadcast all 5 daily calls to prayer over a loudspeaker. Here's WCCO's David Schumann.
أشهد أن محمد رسول
The Muslim call to prayer, recited in here, heard out there.
It is a very simple message to share the greatness of God and to call people to success.
5 times a day, Muslims gather to pray at mosques, but the broadcast for the pre-dawn and nighttime prayers weren't allowed in Minneapolis until now. The city eliminated time constraints from the part of its noise ordinance related to religious worship. In the summer, that means the call could go out as early as 3:30 a.m. and as late as 11 p.m.
Sometimes when you don't hear adhan and you sleep, you cannot wake up and come to the adhan. Now it's clear, like crystal. You hear and you'll be happy to come and pray and join.
Leaders in the Muslim community say only a couple of the city's mosques currently broadcast the call to prayer at all, but more may now start.
We built America on this basic principle of freedom of religion. And so today, actually, it's a victory for our Constitution because our Constitution is for all Americans, not just some Americans.
Dar al-Hidra's imam says he would encourage mosques in neighborhoods where most people are not Muslim to refrain from all 5 calls. For his mosque, he expects this change will attract more people.
What we provide in the mosque is not only for the spiritual, but also we do a lot of other part of the healing too, because we believe for mind, body, and soul.
In Minneapolis, David Schumann, WCCO 4 News.
The Minneapolis City Council approved the ordinance change unanimously. 3 of the 13 council members are Muslim.
Okay, did you hear that last part? It's very interesting. 3 of the 12 council members are Muslim, which, I mean, in most cities, that's happening now. But the practical aspects of Islam growing in the West is not simply, well, we might have more kids in school that are going to celebrate an Islamic holy day, or they're going to fast during Ramadan. They're very real things. And we do know that Islam, in many forms, not everyone, but Islam is quite actively proselytizing. They do believe, as we Orthodox Christians do, that everyone should be their religion. However, the history of Islam goes about this in a little bit of a different way. This is just the truth. The truth of Islam, the truth of the history of Islam is that when you go into a land, you don't go in to be one of many religions. You go in with the unstated goal of either subjecting everyone to Islam or positioning others in such a way that they will feel the discomfort of not being Muslim. Now, I'm not saying that is this in Minneapolis. I'm not saying that. But this is just one issue where, okay, when Islam was smaller, they agreed to certain ordinances and they said, look, you can't have this call to prayer blasted over the loudspeakers at 5 a.m. And I think they allowed 3 of the times. Like for Pittsburgh, it's for today, it was 5:51, 7:10, 12:05, 2:40, 5 p.m., and 6:19. So you would hear that 5 or 6 times a day, right? You would hear that call to prayer starting with the words Allahu Akbar. Now, again, it's just an Arabic phrase. I get it. But it's also a phrase that is said by extremists when they are committing acts of violence. And to my knowledge, no Orthodox Christians are going into some land to commit acts of violence saying, I don't know what, Christ is in our midst, or Christ is risen. This is what it would be. Now, just to take this a bit further, some might say, well, you Orthodox ring church bells at midnight at Pascha. And we say, yes, we do. We do that. And in a Christian country, that is a predominantly Christian country, it's kind of tolerated, but I know some of our Orthodox churches get a lot of grief from the neighbors. Some of the churches even pass out little notes and they say, hey, by the way, we're going to be ringing bells at midnight on Pascha. We're sorry for any inconvenience, but come join us. We'll give you free food downstairs, right? And I know some churches probably have made accommodations where maybe they're just ringing their bells indoors, or maybe they're just playing them indoors. But this is 5 or 6 times a day, every day, sometimes at 5 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, hearing this Islamic call to prayer. That, for an American, is very, very jarring. Let's take a look at slide number 5. Here's the history. If you want to understand why Orthodox Christians know the topic of Islamic incursions and Islamic growth like no one else, look at this slide. Slide number 5. In 632 AD, Muhammad, the false prophet, but the prophet of Islam, dies. And by the way, he is dead and Christ is risen. But I digress. 2 years later, after Muhammad dies, in 634, there is the siege of Damascus. Yes, that Damascus. The Damascus where Paul met Jesus Christ on the road. So already, the city of Damascus fell 2 years after Muhammad died, and they spread out. In 636, all of Syria falls to the Muslims out of the hands of the Byzantine Empire. And in 637, Jerusalem surrenders to the Muslims. In 5 years, some of our most ancient and holiest sites and cities fell to Islam. Now again, some would say, but Islam is very tolerant. Islam is, they believe in Jesus. They believe in Mary. They do not. They acknowledge a Jesus that we do not acknowledge, and they acknowledge a Mary that we do not acknowledge. And the result of this early Islamic incursion, 2 years after Muhammad died, look at slide number 6. These are the 2 most important factors that you have to understand that Orthodox Christians in all of the Middle East, all the way up through the fall of the Byzantine Empire. And by the way, don't be fooled. When we say the Byzantine Empire fell in 453, you have to understand something. Don't think that what you thought was all the Byzantine Empire just immediately fell. What fell was the last remaining part of the city of Byzantium. The empire was done. Now, they put up a good battle in 1453, but they had lost like 99% of the empire at that point. They were surrounded on all sides, and the empire fell to the Turks, and everything changed. Everything changed. What happens with Christians under Islamic rule? They are granted what's called dhimmi status, which in Islam is seen as like a kind thing. You have a protected status. But we understand that this is not, it's not a respectable status. It is a status of subjugation. It allows them to continue practicing faith. However, it is greatly restricted. And there is this Pact of Umar by the Caliph Umar, who said that the Christian inhabitants would be safe and their property and their holy sites. But the reality on the ground is much more complicated than what it looks like in a slide. It's very important that everyone that's listening to this understand that. Whatever Muslim historians or Muslim apologists say, Christians suffered. And not only that, but many Christians capitulated and converted to Islam or accepted Islam. And they may have done it in many different ways. They may have done it through marriage. They may have done it because they needed a job. They may have done it because they wanted to keep their property. They may have done it because they couldn't afford the tax. That's the reality of it. And then there was the restrictions on building new churches, giving religious education. This was not a very simple matter for Orthodox Christians at all. And what happened was they had to pay this tax, this jizya tax. There are probably places where this is kind of still done today. I don't think it's done officially. Remember the whole issue with Islamic State. They wanted to reinstate that. There's no, to my knowledge, at least in a major way, this doesn't necessarily exist anymore because you don't have this kind of setup. But the reality of Christians under Islamic rule is there for everyone to see. For instance, if you look at Saudi Arabia, which is where the Dome of the Rock, not Dome of the Rock, but the Mecca is, it is illegal to be a Christian. Like, you can be a Christian if you are not a member of the country or if you're working there, but you can't build churches, you can't bring in a Bible, you certainly can't openly show your faith, you can't wear a cross, you just can't do these things. And so this is the reality of Christians under Islamic rule, is that you will be under subjugation. Now, I want to sort of put up one more point that is very, very, it's sensitive, and I understand that it's very sensitive, especially because we have tens of millions of Orthodox Christians that live under Islamic rule in one place or another, like Syria, like Turkey, and all of these other places. Look at this slide number 7. Now, this may seem somewhat subjective, but I think slide number 7 is a very fair estimation or summation of how Orthodox Christians have interacted with Muslim rulers. We love to quote St. John of Damascus, right? Everybody goes on the internet and they quote St. John of Damascus because St. John of Damascus, who was kind of there sort of at the beginning, not right at the beginning of this Muslim incursion, but he writes against Islam as a heresy. Now, I think, there is this notion, well, he writes about it as a Christian heresy. I think that's a misinterpretation, because his idea of heresy is just anything that's like not Orthodox. We understand that there are Christian and heretical Christian elements within Islam, just like heretical Jewish elements and heretical pagan Arab elements in Islam. Islam is like a mishmash of all of these different things. Everybody knows this. But when St. John of Damascus writes about it during this first phase, it's like the phase of ridicule. He can say, he wrote things like, he said that their holy book, the Quran, is a ridiculous book. That's what he said. And he said that Muhammad is the forerunner of the Antichrist. Okay? So you could write that way without fear of, I don't know what, losing your head. But by the mid-9th century, you have a different way, because now, as Islam is growing, their capturing of the Byzantine Empire is accelerating. You have a more kind of polemical way of dealing with Islam, noted by writers like Nikitas of Byzantium, where he says that, Islam is not something to be taken seriously. That it's, we can have a sort of, we can still recognize them for what they are. But we're not necessarily dismissing them or poking fun at them like St. John of Damascus did. As the Islamic incursion accelerates and gets closer and closer to the city of Byzantium, you have St. Gregory Palamas, who, by the way, he worked in the court, yes. He dialogues with Islam and Muslim rulers to say, well, what do you believe about this? Well, this is what we believe. Now, I'm not saying that St. Gregory Palamas denied the Orthodox faith. I'm saying that the approach of our church leaders is very different than it was 700 years before that. Now, phase 4, and this is the part, please forgive me if I'm offending anyone, because I don't live under the realities that you live. If you live in the Middle East, if you live in Syria, if you live in Turkey, the reality is, and I've heard this 1,000 times, I have worked, by the way, in several Antiochian churches. My wife is 100% Arab. So I don't speak from non-experience. The phrase that is always used, go and talk to the Egyptians, go and talk to the Copts. I went and spoke at the Coptic church here in Pittsburgh, down in Ambridge. And in public, they'll say one thing. They will say, well, we peacefully coexist with the Muslims. But speak to them in quiet. Speak to them in alone. And they will tell you the truth, that they live under fear, under threat, that they have essentially, historically, capitulated because they can't really do anything about it. And I think the best example of that is the city of Istanbul, formerly known as Constantinople. In Constantinople, you have the Patriarch of Constantinople, who has churches all over the world under him, and he is recognized in a sense. I'm not here to discuss that. He's recognized as the quote unquote ecumenical patriarch, or the first among equals. The reality is that they are given a tiny little piece of land within which to work. Their work is made very difficult, and he can't necessarily travel freely wherever he wants, whenever he wants. And they do not recognize the Patriarch of Constantinople as the Patriarch of anything beyond those walls. They will not acknowledge that he has any authority beyond that. And again, I'm not here to discuss that issue. Why does the Patriarchate of Constantinople not just speak against Turkey? Why don't they just, say, hey, we're, they're oppressing us. They didn't, we can't have schools. There's a reason why. Because they've been under this condition for 1,000 years or more. And they don't have the ability to do that. They have to go through the United States State Department. They, like lately, Trump and J.D. Vance had to say something. Like, it's very, not even diplomatic. It's just like sop that is thrown to them every so often to say, hey, come on, help them out. Instead of the reality, which is Islam and Turkey, which, by the way, is supposed to be officially atheistic. But we know Erdogan has essentially made it into a kind of pseudo-caliphate where they cannot operate freely. And it is indicative of what Orthodox Christians have lived under for many, 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 many centuries. All right? I'm not blaming them. That's not my job. Now, let's bring it back here to talk about why this growth. Look at slide number 8. Why is Islam and why are Muslims growing? Look at this chart. It's kind of shocking and sad, but it's reality. Slide number 8 says that the number of Christians across the globe from 2010 to 2020. Now, slide number 8. Slide number 8. It should be the Muslim population increased. Okay. We have the wrong slide up. All right. Do we have it, guys? Slide number 8. All right. There you go. All right. It says the Muslim population increased more than any other in the world. This is in the world. Okay? Christians went from, and that's all Christians, went from 2.1 billion to 2.3 billion. So it was like a 5.7% change. Muslims went from 1.7 billion to 2 billion, which is a 20% change. Hindus went up, Buddhists went down, other religions went up. The religiously affiliated went up, and the religiously unaffiliated went way up. But look at the chart next to it. The median age for Muslims in the world, all over the world, the median age for Muslims is nearly 10 years younger than non-Muslims. In other words, when you take all the Muslims and you say, what's the average age? You take all the non-Muslims, you say, what's the average age? They are nearly 10 years younger when you average all of that out. So the average age of a Muslim in the entire world is 24, and the average age of non-Muslims is 33. Like, that should make you think. Now look at this one, slide number 9. Muslims expanded as a share of the population in an geographic area. Okay? Look how much it grew. How much did they grow in a particular area from 2010 to 2020? How much did Islam grow? In Asia Pacific, it grew over 10 years by 16.2%. In Europe, by 15.9%. In Europe, in Christian Europe, which, by the way, includes Russia. Russia has a significant Muslim population. Latin America, 6.1%. The Middle East, it grew by 23%. North America, this is unbelievable. North America, Muslims grew by 52%. And in sub-Saharan Africa, it grew by 33%. That's probably not a surprise. It's very large there. And here's another one. Look at that slide number 9 again. Look on the right side. This is where, like, if you say, look, Father Tom, like, I can't do anything about this, right? Like, you can't stop them from coming in. But this is where Orthodox Christians have dropped the ball. Fertility rates tend to be higher among Muslims than non-Muslims globally, meaning Muslims have more babies than non-Muslims. Sub-Saharan Africa is crazy. Like, it's like the biggest poverty, but they have, just on average, non-Muslims have 4.2 kids. They have 5.2. Middle East, not much difference there. North America. In North America, this was 2.0. I think this was in 2020. Yeah, this was in 2020. They were 2.0. We were 2.0. Non-Muslims, they were 2.7. That is, per woman. How many children per woman? Europe, 1.6 to 2.1. In the world, 2.2 to 2.9. All right? And here, slide number 10, is the really bad news. United States citizens. In slide number 10, this is the U.S. birth rate per woman. This is every woman in the United States from, 1950 to 2023. And it plummeted. The fertility rate, essentially, in order for any population to replace itself, it has to be at 2.1. There has to be 2.1 children per woman. And we in the United States are at 1.62. And I'll guarantee you the Muslims are not. I will guarantee you they're having many more babies than we are. They're at 2.7 as of 2020. It's probably higher. They're at 2.7. And as silly as it sounds, one thing that you can do, believe it or not, is have babies. We in the United States, and especially Orthodox Christians, we have to understand that I understand that we are in a kind of economic reality. And I could sit here and talk about how things have changed and how it's very difficult and so forth. But, you know, Orthodox Christian families should not be adopting the societal trends of a secular society when it comes to having children. They shouldn't. Moms and dads, men and women who get married should have babies. Barbara Sumrock says, yay, have babies. I've had 6. God bless you. You're doing your job. God bless you. This, and I know, like, it's a sensitive issue, and I've heard people like say, oh, the church doesn't belong in the bedroom and so forth. Like, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the reality of, as Orthodox Christians, we have to understand. Now, we can't have babies just to out-baby the Muslims. We have to have babies because we love our families and we take the Lord's command to be fruitful and multiply seriously. We're not going to have babies just to outgrow the Muslims. But this is one of those outcomes that you really have to take seriously. And priests need to stop making excuses for, rampant use of every type of birth control. And we need to get back to speaking to our flock in a way that is respectful and realistic and orthodox. And we have to start with not, how can you not have babies? Like, how can you, we're going to wait until we've made our first million. But it has to be young couples that are coming to marriage counseling. And by the way, we're also waiting too long to get married. That's another issue. That's part of why we're not having as many babies as we normally did. Waiting too long. Get married earlier and have lots of babies. And I promise you, God will take care of you. I absolutely promise you, it will happen. But I digress, okay? We're here to talk about the growth of Islam. All right, let's look at slide number 11, and then we're going to kind of wrap it up. We're going to have to go to some of the other subtopics maybe another time. In slide number 11, this is, I think, the biggest warning sign that citizens of the United States need to look at. Listen to these statistics. This is absolutely bonkers. As of 2025, Europe's Muslim population is estimated at around 46 million, or about 6% of the continent's total population of roughly 745 million. This is up from 4.9% in 2016, driven by migration, which is about 50 to 60% of the growth, and higher fertility rates. There it is. They're having more kids when they move or migrate to these Western European countries. And, for instance, even though in France, Muslims are about 10% of the population, they account for 30% of the births. And it is projected that by 2050, France will have more Muslim births than native French births. And we know in places like England, which right now is an officially Christian country under a Christian/Anglican emperor, king, right? They are an officially Christian country. It is estimated that at the current rate of growth of Islam and the decline of Christianity in England, Islam will be the largest religion in England by the year 2050 or 2060. Let that sink in. How do you feel about England, the land of St. Cuthbert, and all of the great saints of the West? How would you feel about England being a majority Islamic country? It's almost unthinkable, but the statistics don't lie. And if things continue the way that they are, it will happen, because the Christian decline in Western Europe is well established. These are sobering realities. When we look at an area like Istanbul, Turkey, or Turkey itself, which only 100 years ago had 2 million Greek Orthodox Christians in Istanbul. And today they have what? 2,000? They went from 2 million to 2,000. Do you understand the seriousness of that? Or in places like Iraq, which the United States went in and invaded, and we're not here to discuss that. But what happened to the Christian population in Iraq? After the United States invaded, it plummeted. Look at Serbia and Kosovo. Look at Syria. Look at Lebanon. All of these places, which were predominantly Christian, are no longer so. Let's bring down the slide and let's kind of wrap this up. The reality of our life as Orthodox Christians is we are going to live under whatever ruler we find ourselves, whether it is a pagan Roman emperor, whether it is an Islamic caliph, whether it is a communist dictator. We are going to live and we are going to worship the Lord Jesus Christ. And we're going to pray for the ruler because we're commanded to do that. We don't have to like him, but we have to pray for him or her. However, even though Orthodox Christians have lived in all of these various times and places under various majority religions, in the United States, we have a different situation. We have a situation where up until even this moment, people of different religions have always kind of gotten along, even though the United States was kind of a predominantly Christian nation. It's never officially Christian, First Amendment. But no matter what your religion was, there was a kind of Christian, tenor to the cultural and historical attitude of the United States. And we did an episode once on Christian nationalism, and that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not suggesting that we should become Christian nationalists, because this is a kind of like aberration. It's a Protestant aberration. However, Orthodox Christians and all Christians, but especially Orthodox Christians, can find things change very quickly. It's 2025. In 25 years, I'll probably be gone. I'll be worm food. Many of you will still be here. And I believe if they still have YouTube in 2050, whatever it's called then, you'll probably just like think about it and the implant in your head will play it. You can go back and watch this, and you're either going to say, whoa, Father Tom, he was so wrong. He was way off, because everybody's Orthodox now in the United States. It's amazing. There's an Orthodox church on every corner. We have 500 million Orthodox Christians. I will rejoice. But what if that is a very different situation? What if this trend tends to continue where the population of Christians decreases, Orthodox Christians are not having as many babies as they should because they're following the kind of secular trends, even if they have converts all over the place. And Islam is just, it's everywhere now. And, what about, for instance, Minneapolis? Minneapolis, what's it going to be? It could be 100% Islam. I don't know. Hope not. But this is, beautiful white cat said, "You're making me sad, Father Sork. I don't want to think of you not being here anymore." Well, neither do I. That's so sweet of you. But yeah, we're all going that way. Yeah, we're all going that way. I'm 62. I don't know. Maybe I'll be 97 if God blesses. Who knows? So all I'm saying is look at the signs of the times. Look at the growth of Islam and Muslims in this country as an opportunity to do something good. Even if it is in our parishes, encouraging our moms and our dads to have more babies. Even if it is encouraging people to get married at a younger age. Even if it is, God forbid, that we would evangelize Muslims. I know there's a few Muslims that have become Orthodox. But I know it doesn't happen in the Middle East. Very seldom. So let's take this as a kind of sober warning that we have to do better as a country, as a religion, to not be alarmist and not say, oh, the sky's falling, but to say, are we living really as Orthodox Christians? Are we encouraging Orthodox families? Are we encouraging Orthodox missions? I'm hearing all about these missions that don't have enough room for people. Okay, let's start new missions. Just open them up. Don't make it so complicated. The bishops, God love you. I love you, bishops, but, either lead or get out of the way. Like, we need to respond quickly and not say, everything's fine. We don't need more clergy. We don't need more people. Like, this is ridiculous. Let's see the reality of what is happening. And all we need to do is follow the gospel. And all we need to do is act like Orthodox Christians and do what we're supposed to be doing. Read the lives of the saints. Go to church. Say your prayers. Love one another. Like, that's everything. But if we don't, these statistics are going to get worse and worse and worse and worse. And I don't want that. I don't want that. I'm not for this kind of pluralism. Islam has not been a good force in the world. Forgive me if I offend anyone with that. They have not been a force for good in the world. And we Orthodox Christians know that better than anyone. Listen to us. Listen to our history. And help us so that we can become the Christians that we're called to be. All right? Final note, point of personal privilege. Thank you all very much for your prayers. I really felt their presence, and I felt the presence of God as I went on the operating table. I did have an operation on my back, and I'm in recovery. I'm supposed to go back to work. Well, I shouldn't say that publicly because my doctor said I'm not supposed to go back. So I'm not going back yet, but I'll see you people on Thursday in church. All right? God bless you all. That's our show for tonight. Remember to like us on Facebook at facebook.com/Ancient Faith Today. Share out our program after that's posted. Give us your feedback. Contact us with any ideas or topics that you might want to hear about. And I really need you to smash that like button. Join us. Oh, not next Tuesday. Join us. It's going to be December 2nd, not next Tuesday. Have a happy Thanksgiving, Americans. Thank God for all of your blessings. All right? So I'll see you on December 2nd. That's it for Ancient Faith Today Live. Good night, everybody.